Hi again, this is Jenna Cullinane-Heggie from the Coordinating Board. Welcome to the two-year Career Schools Accountability webinar. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day today to join us to talk a little bit about not only our accountability system, but the data that's available that you provide to us. And I'll start by sharing a little bit of information about how we use that data, and then we'll get into some of the reporting requirements for the upcoming year. I wanted to, we'll do some introductions as well. So just in terms of housekeeping, as I said, if you could just go ahead and keep yourselves on mute, we'd like to keep the phone line open so that as you have questions, you can unmute yourself and we can hear you. There are also a chat box and a Q&A box. So if there's anything, a comment or a question you'd like to add, feel free to type in there. We'll be monitoring that throughout this session. So this is the second year that we've done this as a webinar. We found that it allowed more people, especially this sector has folks that some are based in Texas but others not, and so this has allowed us a bit broader reach in terms of the institutions that can be included in this discussion of the two-year career school accountability. Just one more housekeeping item before we get started. Wanted to make sure everyone knows that the materials for this meeting are available on our website. So if you go to the Coordinating Board homepage and you go to this event, the Two-Year Career Schools and Colleges Accountability Webinar, you can find the information there. Obviously, you may have found it here or via email, some of the login information. Obviously, you're connected here if you're listening to this. But then also the meeting materials, the agenda and the slides that we plan to share, and some of the other resources my colleague Cliff King will be getting into in just a little bit. If you, Cliff, do you want to just navigate to the home page? So hopefully you're seeing this on the screen, but just wanted to show you, if you haven't gotten to that exact page, if you're on the Coordinating Board homepage, which is thecb.state.tx.us, you'll see events on that homepage, and this is the top line event right now, the two-year Career School and Colleges Accountability webinar. So let us know if you have any questions. Feel free to, again, type in the chat or the Q&A. If you have any trouble, hopefully you'll be able to follow along either on the screen or with the additional materials that are available on the webpage. All right. So this is the agenda kind of outlined a little bit already, but we'll start with some welcome and introductions on our side, and then would also love to hear from you all who's on the call and the institution that you're with in just a moment. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about, again, how we use the data that you provide. And it's an important part of our state strategic plan, 60 by 30 text. So I'll start by giving a little bit of a progress report on how we're doing towards the big state goals and targets. Then we'll move into an update on the accountability system itself. I know that I'm sure everyone does the accountability system on a regular basis, just like taking your vitamins. It's good for you. But we'll be able to show you some of what's available in terms of increased functionality and some of the new features. The next one is a data reporting timeline, so things you can anticipate, both the kind of the process and dates to be aware of heading into the fall. And then we'll answer with some questions and adjourn. I suspect we may be a little bit faster than an hour and a half, so we'll just see, but we have plenty of time for questions at the end. There we go. So just welcome and introduction. So again, I mentioned my name, Jenna, and I'm a Deputy Assistant Commissioner of Strategic Planning. And you can see the information there on that slide, contact information. So I oversee a lot of the work on our accountability system, both for the public institutions and our either two-year career or for-profit or out-of-state colleges as well. And also work a lot on our state strategic plan. And then I'll let Cliff introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Clifford King, and I work with a lot of you on student data reporting, which I'm sure we'll be starting on pretty soon, and I'll be talking with you a little bit later in this presentation.
And we also have a new team member joining us, and I'd like for her to introduce herself as well.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ruby Stevens-Morgan. I am the Director of Strategic Planning and Analysis, and so I will be working with the accountability system as well as other databases and reports that we provide throughout the state. So it's nice to be a part of the coordinating board, and I look forward to working with you all.
Thanks, Ruby. So for folks on the line, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourselves. I know this can be a little bit messy, but if folks would just go ahead and let us know your name and your institution, we'd love to get a sense of who's on the call.
Hi, this is Crystal Allen. I'm from Universal Technical Institute.
Hi, Chris.
Belinda Ibarra, RGV College.
Good afternoon.
This is Marcus McMillan with the Escoffier School of Culinary Arts.
Thanks for joining us. I know there are quite a few others from the participation list. Anybody else unmuted and in a place that you can say, let us know who you are? Okay, I see some on the chat here. So, College of Biomedical Equipment Technology, Richard Gonzalez is with us. Also, Keith Cravens has joined, but no audio. So anyway, thank you so much for letting us know on the chat. Looks like we have upwards of 20 folks on the call. So. We'll welcome you virtually, and thanks again for joining us.
Just a quick note, if you weren't able to call in on the phone line at the beginning when you signed in, you'll be able to hear the presentation over your speakers, but you won't be able to have any verbal interaction. So as Richard did, just use the chat or Q&A if you need to get in touch with us.
Okay. So I'm going to start moving into the 60 by 30 text progress report, and wanted to just take us a quick second to take a step back to say, you may be aware that we have our public sectors of our public universities, public two-year, and also our health-related institutions that are part of our state accountability system. And this started with an executive order from the governor. And later our career schools were included. And so every year we consider the accountability system as kind of our primary source for legislators, institutional leaders, the public, and through the agency to understand what is it that colleges are doing in terms of producing graduates, for example, how many students are enrolled. And we really look at pulling out what we consider to be kind of the key measures that we think help us understand what's happening in higher education across the state of Texas. So this is a really important function that the agency provides, and this is a very well-used resource. The accountability system also feeds the things that are even our highest priority, the things that are featured on our state strategic plan. And so we really appreciate the data that you provide, and I want you to know that this is well-utilized information. We get lots of questions about all of our institutions, but particular questions about each sector. And so this is a really important piece of the work, and you all play a very critical role in helping us understand what's happening at your institutions and across the state. So the state strategic plan has 4 big goals. If you've been in meetings with us or on these kinds of webinars, you know that we talk a lot about the state strategic plan 60 by 30 text. And I'll just quickly talk about those 4 big goals, and want to let you know that there are, of course, kind of the big 60 by 30 goal. Then the 60 by 30 goal is that we aim for 60% of our young adult population, that's our 25 to 34-year-olds, will attain some level of post-secondary credential, a certificate or above, by the year 2030. So that's how we get the 60 by 30 big overarching goal. We also have 3 other goals that support that. One is the completion goal. We're aiming for 550,000 certificate, associates, bachelor's, and master's degrees by the year 2030 or in the year 2030. We have a goal around marketable skills, which is to help ensure that students are graduating and completing programs with identified marketable skills. And we talk a lot about one of the major reasons that students come to higher education is to get a better job. And we want students to leave their programs knowing the hard skills and soft skills that they have that they can take out into the marketplace, and really have those be in a language that's sort of employer-friendly and resume-ready. The fourth big goal is around student debt and wanting student debt to remain manageable. So we think of manageable as the amount of debt doesn't exceed how much you can reasonably pay back. And so for that, we're looking both at the wages of individual students and the amount of debt they have. So at a high level, those are the big priority areas. And what you can see on this slide is some takeaways about our most recent year of progress towards these big goals. So what you can see here is that the 60 by 30 goal, the educated population goal, was a high point for us this year. We showed another steady year of growth, close to the rate needed to reach the 2030 goal. So this is a big stretch goal. 60% is high, and we're currently at 43.5%. I'll show you the numbers on the next slide, but just want to give you kind of a high-level overview of what you're going to be seeing here. That the progress that we've made the last couple of years has been steady and on track. So that's good news. We also noticed that institutions made considerable progress on reducing the number of excess semester credit hours, and the student debt goal is successfully maintained. So good movement on those. There are some areas where we saw growth, for instance, towards our completion goal. We saw an increase in completions, but that growth was fairly slow overall. And for some of our target populations of African American, Hispanic, male, and economically disadvantaged students. I think are you having trouble sorry, I'm going to take a break here. If you just click on the person you're trying to respond to, then you can send the message. Okay, so back to the key takeaways. The next thing is the high school direct enrollment. This is one of the targets under the completion goal that we focus on. And this is an area of particular concern that when we look at all of the public high school graduates in Texas, we see that we've actually stagnated in terms of the percentage of those graduates who come into higher education in the following fall. We know that this is essentially, you can't graduate the students who don't come enroll, and so we're going to need to have some additional attention here, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the factors we think are related to that slowing participation among our recent high school grads. And finally, there's additional effort needed to meet the 2020 Marketable Skills target. This was a survey of institutions to talk to them about their process of identifying marketable skills, and we see that many have made initial steps, but most institutions have a ways to go in terms of meeting this, the target that's coming up in 2020. And just as a kind of a heads up, we do 15-year strategic plans, and so 2020 will mark kind of that first 5 years of the plan, and that's a typical time where we take stock to say, has the economic environment changed? Has the demographic environment changed? Do our goals and targets still make sense? And that will kind of take a step back to assess, where are we, and are there any changes or modifications that are needed? So that's something that we anticipate taking a look at over the next year. So now for the data. Hopefully everyone's ready to kind of climb into some data here. So in this very large table, you're essentially going to see the data that supports those key takeaways I just described. So the big goal, 60 by 30, completion, marketable skills, and student debt are along that far left-hand column. And then you can see each of the targets related to those big goals listed. So just kind of running through what you see here, you see 3 years of data. So it's either so right now we're in 2019, so we're able to report on the data that's available in 2018. In some cases, the data is maybe a little bit more of a lag, but it's kind of what we are able to report at that time. So the last 3 years of what was available in each 2016, 2017, and 2018 is there. Then you can see 1 year improvement since between 2017 and 2018. And then the comparing that, you can use that to compare to what would the annual increase need to look like if we were on target to meet the 2030 goal, which is in the far right-hand column. So looking at the 60 by 30 attainment goal off the top, you can see that we increased 1.2 percentage points in the most recent year, and that's a sizable jump. We need about 1.3 percentage points each year to get to 60%. And we get this information from the American Community Survey. So this is not, this is survey data. There is a kind of a, we're looking at a margin of error on the survey estimate. So we feel quite good that at the state level, we can be pretty confident kind of in that 1.2, that's quite close to where we need to be each year. As for the completion goal, you can see that we did increase to 341,000 certificates, associates, bachelor's, and master's degrees in the most recent year, and that was up 2.2%, but that's well short of where we need to be in terms of growth for each year of just about 4%. Likewise, the overall slowed, and then we saw slowing for each of our target populations. So you can see Hispanic, the growth was about 3.9% relative to about 7.5% we need to see. African American growth, 1.4%. Male completions, 1.7% increase. And economically disadvantaged was one that really jumped out at just, about fewer than 300 additional completions among our students who are economically disadvantaged. So that's a big concern area. We know that there are large numbers of Texas public high school graduates that are low income, as well as returning adults that are low income in the state. And if we want to kind of reach some of our big 550,000 numbers, for example, or the 60% goal, that we will need to be serving and supporting many more economically disadvantaged individuals. The last one there, last target under completion, is where I noted this is the number, the percent of Texas public high school graduates who enroll in higher education the following fall. You can see that number actually decreased. We're aiming for 65% in 2030, 58% as close as 2020, and you can see we've really been stuck around 52% for the last 3 years. And what's happening here is we actually are enrolling more public high school graduates each year. The number has gone up, but the percentage is decreasing because, for instance, over the last few years, the number of students coming into higher education has increased by about 13,000, but the number of Texas public high school graduates at that same time has increased over 30,000. So we're not keeping up with the rate of growth. And we know that some of that is that Texas has a young and growing population, so some of that's population growth that's happening. And also the graduation rates are increasing. High school graduation rates are increasing. So we have more students kind of coming out now. The good news for institutions of public and non-public institutions, there are plenty of students to be enrolling in the state of Texas. This is very different. Low growth or decreasing numbers of students coming out of high school. So our challenge is how best to serve and meet the need here. Moving on to the marketable skills, you can see that one of the targets that we're tracking related to marketable skills is the percent of students who are found working or enrolled within 1 year. And this is a maintenance goal for us. You can see on the far right-hand side that we're aiming for 80%. We think 80% is kind of a reasonable maintenance level, given that there are some folks who go out of state, some folks that are not captured by unemployment, insurance, wage records, and the like, that we want to kind of be at a maintenance level. And so you can see we're just under that, 78.5%, but really quite close. And so we think that's kind of a good place for us to be. Would love to see it tick up just a bit. For student debt, this is another maintenance goal. We're aiming for 60% as an effort to make sure that student debt is not increasing in the state of Texas. And the way we think about this particular measure is how manageable student debt is. As I said, it's kind of a function of how much, what your earnings levels are going to be. So $10,000 might be in debt might be really challenging if you make $30,000. But $10,000 if you make $70,000 in wages may not be as difficult to pay back. So we think of debt as a percentage of first-year wage. And you can see that we're very close to that 60%. We've even ducked under the 60% for the last 2 years. So we're pleased with sort of that level at this time. The other targets associated with student debt are excess semester credit hours. We know that when students take a lot of extra hours, that they are paying for those hours and may not need to take out as much debt as they do if they're sort of consuming the number of hours that's closer to what's required for their program. So you can see that we've decreased 2 over the last year, and that's a big drop, and that primarily is driven by our public 2-year institutions that had a big drop this year. But all sectors went down to contribute to that 2 overall. This is definitely a stretch target for us to get down to 3 excess hours statewide in 2030. And finally, the percent of undergraduates completing with debt. You can see that 45%, 46% of students, all of our graduates in 2018 completed with some level of debt. Our target there is to be no more than 50% of students of our graduates completing with debt. And I think this is one of the ones that people find very surprising, honestly. If you just read the newspaper, you would think that every student was graduating from higher education with $100,000 in debt. There are some of these very kind of worst case scenario stories that are out there. But I was talking to a group of K-12 counselors recently, and I mentioned this one. They said they were very surprised to know that fewer than half of students take out any debt at all, and that many of those have modest levels of debt. There are certainly burdensome levels of student debt, so not to minimize that that's there, but it's not every student, and I think this target really highlights that for people. So we did see a decrease of 1.4 percentage points in the most recent year. So if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to chime in or send them over to the chat or to the Q&A. So I'll just pause for a moment there. Okay. So next I wanted to highlight that these are the goals and targets where the 2-year non-public and career schools are explicitly counted in the state plan. So completions, and for several of the target populations, your data is included, as well as under Marketable Skills that working and enrolled within 1 year. And these are the statewide numbers, again, the same as what I showed on the previous slide. On the next slide, you can see the actual contributions of just your sector. So total completions, you had about 17,000 completions, certificates or associates that would be included here. So it was a decrease over the previous year, but also that wanted to point out that this does make up 5% of all the completions in the state. So this is a big and meaningful slice of the pie here. For our Hispanic completions, about 8,500 of the Hispanic completions in the most recent year came from your sector, making up more than 7% of the statewide total. And again, kind of decreases in each of these categories related to completions, but sizable percentages of the state contribution. So African Americans in the most recent year, 3,520, which is a decrease of about 5% over the previous year. But the completions at your institutions make up a pretty large sector, a pretty large proportion for African American students in the state. And finally, males, about 5,375 completions were among male students this year, a slight decrease and about just under 4% of the statewide contribution there. In terms of the working and enrolled within 1 year, you can see that percent actually went up in the most recent year from 76% to almost 78%, 1.4 percentage point increase. And on this measure, the 2-year non-public and career schools make up about 5.7% of the state total. And this slide shows the changes in the number of institutions. So this sector, more than others, changes year to year. So some of the fluctuations we see are because the number of students are increasing or decreasing, but also because the number of institutions can change. Could be increasing or decreasing each year. So what you see here on this slide is the last 3 reporting years and some of the reasons for increases and decreases in the number of institutions. So you can see in the most recent year that no institutions left because of SARA and state agreement for authorization for reciprocity agreement.
State authorization reciprocity agreement.
Reciprocity agreement, very good. Okay, Cliff keeps me honest here. So. Comments about that? We are unable to hear you. Okay, so let me ask if others would chime in. Is anybody else having trouble hearing? Yes, having trouble hearing. Because it's quiet? Okay, you're back now. Okay, so let me keep talking to make sure people can even decide if they can hear me or not. The audio is going in and out. Okay, that's very strange. So, Cliff, you want to let us know what you're typing in there?
Okay, yeah. So I'm saying, see if for those of you that aren't, this isn't going to help for people that can hear this, but I'm basically just saying if you're not hearing through your phone, it could be because you weren't able to connect via phone at the time of login, but you may be able to hear through your speakers unless we're having some other kind of difficulty.
Okay, so we will check on troubleshooting that quickly, and let me just Ruby, would you mind texting Victor to ask him if he could come down and help us troubleshoot the audio? Okay. So I'm sorry for the folks for having technical difficulties if it's hard to hear, but we will try to see what we can do on our side, and if you can connect through your computer speakers, that may be a better bet, and we'll try to plug away and keep moving forward. So I think Cliff, I'm going to hand it over to you here.
I'm going to say this verbally in case anybody can hear us, but if not, maybe you can type it in there. If for some reason the audio doesn't go through for anybody, hopefully we're recording this and okay, it says it's back on, okay. But for anyone that may have missed it, we're recording this and we'll post this in a day or two afterwards so that you could possibly come back and pick up on the audio portion if you missed any of this. So. Okay, and I do see a question that someone missed the information about SARA. So Cliff, could you circle back to that? Sure. So the SARA stands for State Authorization Reciprocity Agreements, and that's sometimes in your sector it's not quite as prevalent, but basically if you are an institution where Texas is not your home state, but you have a presence here, if your only presence in other states besides your home state is distance ed, and your state is a SARA state, as Texas is, then you can opt out, and you may not need a certificate of authorization to report. And so instead of having to report data to our state, for example, all you have to do is, by participating in that, is report, I believe it's fall enrollments, once a year to the national organization. If you are based in Texas and you happen to be operating in other states, where you're only offering distance ed to other states, you can also opt out of, possibly get out of having to report data to them directly if you're a SARA member. And so if anybody is not aware of that, or you wanted to actually contact us here to find out whether you could become a part of SARA, if we're your home state, then you can contact us and we can give you more information, but that's what that is. It tends to apply a little more to the four-year institutions, as they have more of a, wider presence in that sense. So, okay, we're going to move forward to the accountability system.
Okay. So if you are based out of another state, will have traditional classes, then SARA does not apply, correct? So
yeah, so there are some exceptions to the SARA exception, and that is if you have a significant enough physical presence in Texas, either a physical on-ground location or your clinicals are at a greater number. I don't know if the limit is 20 at a single location. So you may still have you might be an exempt in other states, but for Texas, if you have a significant enough presence, you may still be required to have that certificate of authorization and still report data to us. So if you're ever not sure, you can always check with us. I'll be talking to you later about another area of our agency that deals with you all related to your certificate of authority or certificate of authorization includes Kathy Mayer, Paul Schuler, and Christine Ayala, and they sort of handle your accreditation and your certificate of authorization stuff. So if for some reason you would be exempt now, they could clear that up for you. So our area tends to deal with the student data reporting, and then once you report that data, it gets put into our systems, which I'm going to show you now. So I'll get into these pretty quickly, but for anybody that's new, I'll give you an overview of our accountability system. But these are a couple of things that were added or enhancements to our accountability system that I will go through. Some of it has to do with the data views are kind of a little more favorable for moving back and forth between data and sectors. There's a little more options with accountability reports, and then I'll go through all these as we move through the actual example. A couple ways to get into the accountability system itself. I'll show you in just a second. You can get there through we have another website called the Texas Higher Education Data website, in addition to our main website, and then there's the direct link to the accountability system, and I'll show you how to get to there. So from our main site, if you weren't aware of our data site, you can either, under Data and Reports, you can click on Texas Higher Education Data homepage, or you can go directly to the accountability system. I'm going to take you to this is that Texas Higher Education Data page, and then if you are on this page, on this website, you can click, the accountability system is a featured application you can click on directly, and here's the accountability system. And basically, there are several aspects to this, but the data that's presented here is set up according to the goals of 60 by 30 text. So, and we talked about some of those, and then you'll see that there's overall statewide, then our public institutions, and then your sector. It's kind of a strange title, but we had limited space. So for your sector, even though it says non-Texas and career, your two-year institutions are under here, and the four-year as well. So I'll just show you. Anyway, I'll get into accessing the data in just a second, but you get to that from this page. Some other things that are available is under the Resources tab. There's measures and definitions. There are several guides. There's a quick start guide, which will give you a sort of a tutorial on how to get into the system and what you can find here if you're coming in cold. The interactive guide is for if you need to actually, if you want to drill in and do some of your own analysis or comparisons of data. The institutional portal guide is for a piece I'll talk about later, a small piece for your institutions, but that that has to do with a small component where your institutions can enter some licensure data and certification data if you have it. So that's there. And then the interactive is the other section we'll get to it. So I'm going to go back to the main page. So since we sort of were featuring the completion goal, and since your sector has a significant component to this, right now it's defaulting to this overall statewide. Occasionally this takes a little bit of time. Hopefully it will respond. There we go. Okay, so one of our slides we showed you the overall statewide. This is for all sectors contributing for the last 2 years. If you see here, there's the total 333,920 to 341,307. You'll see the difference between the slides that you'd seen. This percentage change that's shown here is from 2016 to 2018, whereas on the slide we showed a 1-year change. Just a quick thing, down at the bottom of this section there are these blue tabs that are actually filters. It defaults to all, which gives you the total, but if you want to see things by a smaller group, you can click this off, and then I'm going to click on the ones that we were covering. So if you want to see the Hispanic contribution to completions, which we showed on a slide, you click on Hispanic, click that off, and click on African American. You can see that contribution, click that off, and click on male, and you can see that contribution. Or you can click on all and see all of them. So one of the nice features that's been added is that right now we're in the statewide. If you click on two-year institutions, which is your sector, instead of having to start over and pick the completion goal again, you can pick your sector, and now this shows you the statewide contribution for your sector, which we had showed you also on a slide. And again, you can use these same filters. I'll just show one of them. This was that Hispanic component, et cetera. Okay, then you can also, if you wanted to, once you're in your sector, you can actually pick one of your institutions. So hopefully it won't be singling out anybody inappropriately, but anyway, this. So you can actually see your institution's contribution. If you've reported data, some of you may be new and you might not have, but this will show your contribution, and again, you can look at the filters as you so choose. So one other feature that was added, in case you're new to this and we're trying to figure out what you're looking at as far as measures and definitions, each sector kind of has potentially has a separate set of measures that apply, whether you're a 2-year institution, a 4-year, a public or private. So if you click on the measures and definitions under resources and then pick your sector, which is 2-year career, this will pop up the measures that we track for your school based on either the student data reports that you provide us, which is the CBM 001 enrollment and CBM 009 graduate report, or some of the data we are able to get if you report it for the state of Texas. We get some of it from IPED's reporting as well. So again, I'm going to just show you, if you want to see what the measure is, or the definition of it, you click on the measure. You can actually download a PDF if you want to see them all summarized. And then this is a new feature that's not necessarily obvious, but what looks like a little chart or bar graph. If you click on that next to the measure, it'll jump you right back into the data itself for your sector, which is kind of a nice feature. So that's sort of a new piece. Okay, so couple other things that, since we're here, there's a couple ways to get accountability reports, and one of which is to, I'm going to again pick a school, one up here. Okay, once you pick either the statewide or a school, there's over in the upper left corner, there's a create a complete report via PDF. What this will do is it doesn't necessarily do it does an overall kind of summary of each of the measures. It may or may not break it down in the way you'd like, but at least if you want a quick snapshot of all the measures that your sector contributes to, it gives it in a nice little quick summary. So that's one way to get to that report. Let me get back. Okay, the other way is through, if you go to interactives, there are 3 buttons here, the bottom of which is accountability reports. Here you have to pick a few things, but if you pick, again, pick your sector and then pick a year, current year, pick an institution. Well, some of these, okay, this actually is very similar to the one you can get at the front of it. Sometimes, and it sort of depends on the report itself, but some of these you might get bookmarks in it. But anyway, it's just 2 ways to get to these kind of reports. These predefined reports, unfortunately, right now these are only compiled. They're spreadsheets that are only compiled for the public sectors. Maybe in the future we might add your data for these as well, but just wanted to let you know what they were in case you were wondering. And then this other part is if you want to actually drill into and either look for your institution specifically or across institutions, you can get quite a bit of data. If it's included for your institution, you can actually go in and first, again, I'm going to use this example school I've been using. Okay, and then quite a bit of data, but I'm going to stick with the degrees and certificates. I just wanted to show you, in case you go into this, it's a little confusing. If you don't filter anything, you're going to get everything broken out by all the categories. So we'll go ahead and leave, I'm going to leave the years, so it'll show 5 years of data. But if you don't want to, if you want to see totals, you click off the select all on each one of these genders and ethnicities. If you click them off and click off the type of degrees so that you're not filtering for that and not filtering for region, then when you view the report, you'll just see the totals. So you have to play around with that to kind of get a feel for what kind of data you can get. You can view it as a web page, or you can view it as CSV, as an Excel or PDF if you want to play around with that. The other thing that's nice is, I believe, I don't want to lead you astray, but I believe, anyway, I think one thing that is slightly different from before is I think it will remember while you're on this screen, I think it will remember the data that the choices you've made, so you don't have to start over every time, I think. Don't want to promise something if it's not true.
Cliff, so there was a question that came in on, are there any changes to the CBM 001 or the CBM 009 for this year?
No, there are not. We're going to be talking about that next after I'm just about finished here with this section. So that's actually a good transition. We'll move back to so pretty much this is the accountability system. And again, this is sort of our way to give back to you so you can kind of keep up with the data that you've reported to us and how it's being used, as well as how it's contributing to the state. So we certainly appreciate that you're participating in reporting, and it part of the reason for this is we want you to know that we are using your data and it is contributing to higher education in Texas. So thank you for that. So now we're going to go back. Okay. So data reporting, since someone brought that up. Okay, so let me pull up a, so as far as student data reporting, nothing has changed as far as due dates and timelines, but wanted to kind of highlight those again. So I believe, and I'll show in a minute here, but that your single point of contact for your institution, which may or may not include your reporting official, if that's what you are, should have received on October 15th an email. I believe it came from, it might say Chapter 7 on the from thing, but it was from Stacy Silverman that basically just gave you updated information about links to reporting manuals, timelines, et cetera, and just sort of reminder and contact information like my contact information. So I'm going to go to one other piece here. So back, I'm going to open up this. If you hadn't seen this, one of the resources is a little 3-page PDF called Data Reporting, and I'm just going to highlight part of it. So one of the things someone brought up, that the big part that involves student data reporting that is due December 1, and what we call the CBM 001 enrollment and CBM 009 graduation report. That's one part of your reporting, and just so that it doesn't get confusing, because it sometimes can, another process that is involved, and some of you, some of your institutions will have a similar timeline. So the folks I mentioned earlier, Kathy Mayart, et cetera, they're involved with there's an annual compliance review process where you update accreditation materials and programs that you're offering in Texas, et cetera. And I think they've split your schools into 2 groups, some that report on January 15th, some that report on July 15th. And just to let you know, this is a separate process and a separate portal to log into. Sometimes it gets a little confusing. If you try to submit student data to the portal for this system, it won't work right, and vice versa. But I just wanted to let you know that there are 2 separate sort of aspects of reporting that you might have. The other piece, which is a smaller piece, we'll touch on a little bit later, is there is an interactive portion in the accountability system for some of your institutions if you have licensure and certification data. I'll touch on that later. But anyway, and then just one other thing related to the student data reporting. And the system is open now for you to compile your data and submit reports whenever you're ready to do that. And I'll assist you if anybody needs assistance with that. Technically, the due date for initial submission is December 1, which it is every year for the prior academic year. So this would be September 1, 2018 through August 31st, 2019 for your enrollment and graduates. The goal is for you to get submissions into us in a timely fashion, and then it is a little tricky around Thanksgiving and Christmas to sometimes have the time to do all this, but the goal is to complete the full submission and cleaning up any edit reports and certifying your data within 6 weeks of the due date. So in the past several years, you all have been great at this. We've been within a week of our deadline the last several years, so please keep up the good work. We just added a little piece here that just kind of highlights some efforts to make sure we stay on track. It's not meant to be punitive or anything. It's just sort of, we've never had to you see these items 2 through 4, we've never actually had to implement any of these because you've all responded. So the main thing is, and I'll probably be communicating with most of you if there's any issues, is if you can get an initial submission of your reports in within 2 weeks of December 1st, or if you've communicated with us and let you know what your limitations are and we know you're working on it, that's fine. There's no, like, you know, we don't want you to just slack off and put it off till the end. But anyway, but we will, if we haven't heard from you by December 15th, I will be contacting you to see if you perhaps didn't get the information or find out what's going on. And then as we get, if you have submitted data but haven't certified it or cleaned up data, then we'll contact you regarding that later as we get closer to the certification date. Okay. All right, just wanted to highlight a couple more things related to the data reporting itself. So there are two. I'll show the PowerPoints first, I guess. But no, we're here. So there are the two reporting systems I was telling you about. The primary one, the one that's due December 1st. When you're ready to submit your reports, you.
So that was, which, did you click on EDC?
Yeah, EDC portal, which is called Move It. This is the one, the secure login for where you submit your student data reports. And if any of you either are new to the process or have forgotten your credentials, they haven't changed since last year, but if any of you have forgotten them, contact me either by email or phone. And this is where you enter username, password, and if they're in the right format, it's a pretty simple process where you just upload your data, and then later in that day, our system will pick it up and run edit reports for you. The other piece, just so that if you happen to be doing either accountability reporting or your annual compliance review, you'll see a login that looks like this called CB Pass. You can get into both those systems through one of those links, or there's other materials that will be sent to you related to that. But just so you know, this is not where you submit your student data reports, in case that isn't clear. So one other piece, in case some of you, another place that is a resource, in case some of you either didn't get the memo that was sent, and again, you can contact me. I can make sure you get a copy of the student data reporting memo, but the reporting manual that is applies to your institution, we update it every year, but there's no changes to the format. It's just to keep up with current information and links and et cetera. So that's one resource for you. If there are references to appendices, they're also here. One new thing that we have is that we placed a copy of the CBM reporting memo, the one that was sent out on October 15th. A copy of it is included here for the one that went out on October 15th. So that's just to let you know about that. Okay. So one other piece that I wanted to show you was this is one that would be due after the student data reporting or maybe during the time period. Let me go ahead and this is the institutional portal for the accountability system, which you can also access your annual compliance materials as well. this screen might look a little different for you, but basically you go to My Access, and then whatever your institution has access to, I'm clicking on the Accountability Institutional Portal. What you're seeing here, I'm looking at it as an administrative user. You might see something different. If you log in, you will see just your institution's data. So just a few things to highlight here. Some people didn't even know this existed, but there is an additional piece. So you can, if you click under Institution Data and hit Enter Data, again, pick your type. And pick an institution. Through the current year. Okay, so there's just a couple things. So there's a certification pass rate, a licensure pass rate, and then there's a narrative question if you wanted to add that regarding efforts toward meeting 60 by 30 text goals. So I'm just going to click on licensure pass rate. If you have this information for any of your programs and you're able to provide it to us, we are interested in it. It's a pretty simple entry. You just put in the zip code, the number of students who took a licensure exam, and the pass rate. This is an optional thing, but if you have it, we are interested in it. One other, a separate piece, which is, in case you were interested, there's a place where you can actually enter comments on any of the measures that are in the accountability system. If you, I'm going to pull up one. Sorry. I'm again pulling up the completion goal. So what this does is it pulls up a goal for your institution, and if you wanted to, again, it's optional, you don't have to display it, but if you wanted to add any comments that either explain or enhance anything about your data, you have that option to do that in this system as well. Some of our public institutions do it. It's again, totally optional. We just wanted you to know that it was another feature that we have that is available to you. So that's it for the data reporting piece. We'll stop in a minute to give you answer any questions if there are any. So I've got one more piece to show.
No questions through the chat right now.
Okay, so the last, and let me get back to the PowerPoint here. Okay, so just wanted to show you a couple other items where we use your data that you report to us, in case you weren't aware of it, besides accountability. And that is, again, from the Texas Higher Education Data Site. One of the pieces under, there are something called exit cohort reports. And your sector is down at the bottom of this. I'm going to pick a statewide one just to show you. If you had noticed that there was a section under Marketable Skills that related to outcomes related to employment and or higher education. So for those of you who are able to report to us student data by actual SSN, we're able to, if those students are found in Texas, either in employment in Texas through UI wage records or have left your institution and shown up at another institution within the state, we're able to track them for outcomes, for employment, for higher education outcomes. One of the ones, I'll show you one like here's your sector may stay within the career school sector, or they may move on to public or a four-year institution, and it tracks that kind of thing. It even tracks by program area outcomes. So anyway, just wanted to let you know if any of you want to know more about this kind of data, and this is all coming. It's nothing really fancy. It's just coming from your enrollment and graduation data, and it's matched, yeah. So it's a nice thing. And we understand that some of you may not, because of whatever your restrictions at your institution, you're not able to provide Social Security data, and that's okay. It's just if you provide us an ID that's unique to your school, we can't track anything beyond your school. So that's just to let you know about that. Another piece that's also included where we use your data is under overview. There's something called institutional online resumes. I think this was actually a legislative piece that was added where they actually wanted to see this even for your sector. So these are just these are sort of one-page snapshots of hopefully this will pull up. So basically, this is just a quick snapshot of each institution's data plus how they might compare to a peer group, so other institutions in your state. The enrollment and graduate piece comes from the data that you report to us. Some of the other data comes from IPED's data if we're able to find that for your institution. So just wanted to let you know about that too if you had not, if you weren't aware that existed. And all right, so now okay, so we're going to pause here. That pretty much covers what we were trying to summarize for you and give you an update on. Again, I'm sure I'll be interacting with a lot of you with the reporting process, and but we wanted to open up for either by, if you want to unmute your phones or put something in the chat room if you had any questions specifically to what we were talking about today. Have a little bit of time if you want to raise any questions, feel free.
Nothing coming through on the chat. And that's fine. You've got our emails here if you want to follow up with anything. But we'll do kind of last call, and if we hear none, we'll go ahead and say farewell for this year. Thanks again for your time. Really appreciate it, and sincerely appreciate reporting on time this year coming forward. And we'll be in touch. Thanks so much.
And before Jenna shuts things down, I just want to make one comment in case, because we don't really know for sure what's going on out there. In case for some reason some of you weren't able to get the audio portion of this recording, I mean, we'll post the recording of this so that you can see the whole thing in a few days if you weren't able to capture the audio part of it. All right. Thank you.